Welcome back into another edition of the Fantasy Authority Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Steele. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyRad13. Joined, as always, C. Kutzer FF is where you can find him on Twitter. His name is Cody. What is going on tonight?
Not much, man. I'm doing well. Got back to the gym for the first time today since all the COVID stuff happened. So feeling swole, out of control. Feeling good. Had tacos for dinner, dude. Tacos, the 101 of all food. Got a little brewski going. We're gonna talk rankings. My favorite thing in the world. I'm fired up, bro. Let's go.
I know, so if everybody knows, he has been all up in my DMs, like all day. Like, dude, I am fucking psyched about talking quarterbacks, talking rankings. Like, it is the absolute. It's a blasty blast, as they say.
They do say that. That is that we have determined that is a thing. This is a blasty blast, and it's going to be a blasty blast.
Yeah, even your boy J Mike has confirmed that. You know, the blasty blast. He is team blasty blast.
Yeah, I think we all are. I think that is something we can all get behind is team blasty blast.
Anyways, all right. So tonight we're going to be talking about some fantasy football quarterback rankings. We're going to start this. We're going to be recording 2 times a week for the next 3 weeks. We're going to hit up quarterbacks this week, tight ends on Thursday, and then next week we'll hit running backs, and the week after that we'll hit the wide receivers. So we're planning on having a lot of good conversations out of this. We kind of went through and did our own rankings and everything. So that's what we'll be hitting on tonight is the quarterbacks. If you could, I really appreciate it. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you're listening on podcast, please hit us up. Rate and review. Yeah, rate and review is what it's called on your podcast platform. We're pretty much everywhere. iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Google Podcast, fucking everything. Who gives a? I mean, but nobody cares about that, right? We ain't got time for that. So if you could hit that, I would really appreciate it. Or you can hit us up in Slack, right? If you want to talk more rankings, more quarterbacks, hit us up in Slack. It's absolutely free. You can find that in the link below. Anyways, so let's go ahead and let's just jump right into it, right? Because people are here for the concept. They're not here for us to, market ourselves, right? So with that, I put together a little montage of our individual top 12 quarterbacks. So let's check that out first. So with that, let's go ahead and just jump right into it, right? Let's talk about our top 12 quarterbacks, our consensus top 12 quarterbacks. You can find on our website at thefantasyauthority.com. It's right on the homepage. You can click the rankings and you can see exactly what we got going on. Of course, Cody is slacked and only has the quarterbacks done right now. I have all of them done. I have half point and full point PPR and I don't do standard because this isn't 2001. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into one. Hey, who's surprised? Patrick Mahomes, number 1, right?
Weird.
So for me, we both have Patrick Mahomes, number 1. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. I know that some people are going to have Lamar Jackson at QB1. I understand. We'll talk about him in a second. But for me, it was pretty simple. Despite the fact that he only played in 14 games, despite the fact that he had a high ankle sprain for the first part of the season, then dislocated his kneecap, he still was 5th in fantasy points per game. The dude balled out last year despite that. And I don't know what else there's to say. He did regress some. I know people were calling for a big regression for him last year. I think the regression had more to do with the fact that he was hurt. He was still a top 5 quarterback up until the point he got hurt. Heading into this season, there is some red flags with him when people will say that, the Chiefs have the toughest quarterback schedule for any quarterback this year, but they do have the 8th easiest schedule for weeks 14 through 16. But overall, it's Patrick Mahomes. He is schedule proof, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys where you don't look into who he's playing, what the schedule is. The only thing you worry about with him is the ADP and whether or not you want to spend that early capital. But like you said, it's pretty cut and dry with Mahomes. He is the number 1 going right now with an ADP of 205. So just a quick aside, and we'll move on down the list. Are you spending that capital on Patrick Mahomes? Are you going to be drafting him at the mid to early second?
No. I mean, we talk about it all the time, right? And It's going to happen. People are going to take him. People are going to take him and Patrick, or him and Lamar Jackson. Both of them are going in the second round. To me, that's a little bit ridiculous, in my opinion, to take him, either one of them in the second round. Unless we're talking super flex, it's a different ball game. But if we're talking about single quarterback, we say it every year: late round quarterback, late round quarterback, late round quarterback. I don't know why these guys haven't been pushed down further, because of it's just become so standard now with late round quarterback. But no, I will have 0 Patrick Mahomes. I will have 0 Lamar Jackson. The only time I would be playing them is in the DFS streets.
At what point would Mahomes have to get to? Like, when is the earliest that you would pull the trigger on a quarterback that early?
4th round, I think. I think that would be like, if somehow he fell and I was in a draft where people were like-minded like me and waited on quarterback. If he fell somewhere in the 4th, then I would probably consider it. But second round, there's way too much there. I would much rather draft a quarterback and a running back. We don't like to spend a lot of time on that because I think everybody pretty much knows that for the most part. However, there's going to be people that are going to take them. Now, there are some people. Let's move on to Lamar Jackson. You have Lamar Jackson at 2. I have him at 3. And so, which for some people that may be hot, or coming in a little hot with Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about that let's talk about him now, I guess. So last year he had a fucking unbelievable season, right? He finished the first in fantasy points per game, 27.8. It wasn't even close to the next guy. In terms of, I think he had 4 or 5 more points a game than what everybody else did. He was essentially like an RB1 with a quarterback, right? Because he had 36 passing touchdowns, 1,200 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 27 red zone carries. He was number 2 in true passer rating, 5th in average air yards. Like, the dude just balled last year, right? And I don't like talking about regression because I think it's ridiculous. Like, yes, he is going to regress. Like, that's not surprising. If anybody expects he's going to throw for 3,600 or 36 touchdowns along with 1,200 rushing yards, it's not going to happen. He's gonna fall a little bit more back down to earth a little bit. I'm not expecting a huge drop off or anything like that where he's not going to be drafted. He's not going to be a top 12 quarterback. No, I have him at QB3. There's a reason I have Dak Prescott ahead of him. But for me, I love Lamar Jackson. I won't have any of them because he's going in the second round. And to be honest with you, I would much rather have Dak Prescott, who's going in the 6th round.
Yeah, that's I could easily be persuaded to make that same move and put Dak at 2. That, like you said, the thing with Lamar is that regression is gonna happen. 9% touchdown rate last year. So I went back and looked at just like the past couple of years to see how this changes and if it changes. 2016, Matt Ryan was the only quarterback that had a touchdown percentage over 7. 2017, it dropped down to 3.8. And then in 2017, Wentz was the only one with a touchdown rate over 7%. It was at 7.5. Following year went to 5.2. 2018 was the year that Patty Mahomes busted out. He had that 8.6% touchdown rate. Following year went down to 5.4. So it's just something that's going to happen. It's just a natural thing that, you know what I mean, when you have a quarterback with that high of a touchdown rate. How far is it going to drop? That's yet to be seen. I do think with the way that they've been using Mahomes, the way they've been using Lamar Jackson in Baltimore is that they seem to be bringing him along the correct way, right? Like, his rookie year is basically just all running, minimal passing. They added a little bit more. So if he can grow that a little bit next year, I think that might soften the blow. But Dak at 2, I don't understand if someone's saying that's a hot take, or that it shouldn't be that way. I could easily get behind that because of the regression that's definitely going to be hitting Jackson.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to be significant. I don't think he rushes for 1,200 yards. Like, that was incredible. That's not something I don't think we'll see again anytime soon. I think it's more likely he lands in the 700 to 800 rushing yards, which is still fucking fantastic. Like, people need to understand that, right? Like, that is still really good. And so I think couple that, I think we see a drop off in touchdowns as well, where in the passing touchdown department, he lands in the 25 to 27. Still a great season. But for me, that's why I have him a little bit lower, because I feel like Dak Prescott really has nuclear upside in terms of this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he finishes the QB1, right? For many years, Dak has always been kind of the overlooked guy, right? People are just ever super excited about drafting him. But, I mean, last year he was fantastic. 3rd in fantasy points per game. He was 2nd in deep ball completion percentage, 5th in deep ball attempts. And to be honest with you, I mean, he was 2nd in passing yards, 2nd in air yards, 30 passing touchdowns last year, 277 rushing yards. He's kind of like the total package, right? With what you get with him. So not to mention the fact that they brought in CeeDee Lamb, they shipped out Randall Cobb, made a big upgrade there. They're the number 3 wide receiver or number 2 wide receiver, however it shakes out. Jason Witten was lost. They did lose Travis Frederick. Obviously brought in Mike McCarthy. They said they're not going to touch the offense, but this offense is pretty much the same. I think there's a lot of room to grow. Throw in CeeDee Lamb, not to mention the fact that they have the second best schedule for quarterbacks as well. Dak Prescott does. So I really like Dak Prescott a lot. Like I said, 6th round, like I would start to think about it. If he was sitting there in a draft in 6th, 7th round for me, I would be a little tempted not to take him. I'm typically a guy that doesn't draft a quarterback until the 10th, 11th, 12th round, or maybe even later, 15th round, depending on how the draft shakes out, depending on who's on the board. But if he was sitting there in the 6th, 7th round, I would have a hard time not considering it.
Yeah, like you said, that's something. When it comes to me and taking a quarterback early like that, it's all going to depend on what the majority of the other guys are doing. Like chances are you're not going to be in a draft where 10 other guys are playing the quarterback chicken game of who doesn't want to take one first. But if you're in a draft like that and you have somebody like Dak sitting in the 7th round, I will happily take him there. Last year, 596 attempts. I think it's going to be around the same, even with those the losses that you mentioned. That's 190 targets up for grabs. So even with Lamb coming in, there's still all those targets available. You mentioned a line. I think that's that is an easy thing to see with Dak possibly finishing as quarterback 1.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that if you just kind of look at the consistency with him as well. So last year, he had 12 QB1 weeks. I mean, Lamar Jackson had 13. So they weren't that far off in terms of, and that's kind of what you're looking for in terms of, because as you get further down this list, you start finding a lot of quarterbacks who are very inconsistent, where they may only have 7 or 8 QB1 weeks, where, if you were to draft these guys and you're holding on to them all year, there's going to be certain weeks where they're just not, they weren't necessarily as valuable as some of these other guys. So obviously that is one of the upsides, I guess, of taking a quarterback a little bit earlier, because even Patrick Mahomes, who we mentioned was hurt, had 10 QB1 weeks and 4 QB2 weeks, which Dak had 12 QB1 weeks, 4 QB2 weeks, and then Lamar Jackson had 13 QB1 weeks, and 10 of those were top 5 QB weeks. So, I mean, that's just how amazing he was last year. So, let's go ahead and move on to our number 4, and that is Kyler Murray. So for me, I like Kyler Murray a lot, right? Like I kind of went back and forth for me between Kyler and Russell Wilson. I think both of them are fantastic, but with Kyler, I like a little bit more. I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. I don't think their defense is going to be as good, and I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more. And so with him, I think there's a lot of room to grow with Kyler. Last year he was 12th in fantasy points per game, 14th in fantasy points per drop back, but he was 6th in deep ball completion percentage, 9th in deep ball attempts. However, what really carried him last year was his rushing ability as well, because he only had 20 passing touchdowns, and 3,700 yards passing, but he did have 544 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. So they added DeAndre Hopkins. I think all that helps. Kenyon Drake. I think this offense just kind of takes another step forward this year, really high volume, high passing offense. And that's what we're looking for. He has that Konami code. Shout out Rich Rebar with that one every time. But I mean, that's kind of what you're looking for from your fantasy quarterback. And, somebody that possesses that kind of upside with the fact that he's able to use his legs as well. So, I mean, I love Kyler Murray, and I just have him slightly above because I like the weapons a little bit more. And I think they're just a team that's going to have to throw the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's something that we have been talking about all off season, especially with the addition of D-Hop, is that we see that, the Kingsbury offense implemented a little bit more vertical shots. It's what we thought we were going to be getting with Kingsbury coming in anyway. Kyler last year he only had 5 QB1 weeks, but he still finishes QB7 overall. Like I said, we've been talking about the vertical shots coming in more. He was 15th in completed air yards and 18th in pass attempt distance. So I see both of those going up. And if he can, obviously if the increase in his QB1 weeks come up, he could be easily looking at a QB2-3 kind of finish in 2020.
No, I think there is a lot to like there with him. So let's move over to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, again, is just always undervalued in terms of the NFL. by his own damn team. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
They just continually have wasted this man's career away. They've never really fully unleashed him for multiple seasons. I never have understood why. He's arguably the second or third best quarterback in terms of talent in the league, in my opinion.
For sure.
And he is always so damn efficient. Like last year, he was his 20.4 fantasy points per game was fifth. He was fifth in fantasy points per drop back. He averaged 8 air yards per attempt, which was 8th. He just does everything really well. He doesn't rush the ball as much as he used to, but he still had 342 rushing yards, which was 6th most, and 3 rushing touchdowns. As we mentioned, we know that Seattle wants to run the ball. That is their name of their game. They brought in Carlos Hyde, another running back. That's just what they needed. And then they decided to bring in Greg Olson to that offense. But as we talked about with Tyler Lockett, which we'll talk about when we get to wide receivers, which to me feels very undervalued this year, and then DK Metcalf. So there's a lot to like here with this offense. Obviously, Russell Wilson, if you wanted to put him at 3, you wanted to put him at 4, I wouldn't hate you for it. I just had Kyler Murray slightly above him.
That was the same one I kept going back and forth on as well. And maybe I will be buying into this too much, but I'm fully on board with the squeaky wheel narrative. Like, we've never seen Russ actually talk out and, mention like we should be, running a faster pace. We should be throwing the ball more. And I do think that he has enough of Pete Carroll's respect that Pete Carroll might bend a little. Like, I don't think they're going to become some crazy run and gun, high octane, crazy offense. But if they increase that a little bit, man, like that, like you were talking with how efficient he's been his entire career. I was talking about the touchdown percentage a little bit earlier and how that tends to fluctuate kind of all over the board with some quarterbacks. In his career, he has only had 2 years with a sub 6% touchdown percentage. So they're like, if they would just open this up just a little bit, like 3, 4, 5 more attempts per game, I think that can go a long way with Russ Wilson. He's someone else who could easily be up there in that QB2, QB3 conversation by the end of the year. For fantasy purposes.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he could win the MVP. I mean, the dude's a beast, and it's just been the
he's
fact
so
that,
good.
And then it doesn't help either that they've never surrounded him really with a good offensive line. Their offensive line was 28th in pass protection last year. I mean, every year it's like this, and it's like they don't ever care about their offensive line. I've never understood it, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Russell Wilson has been such a magician back there and can escape the pocket, and he's been able to do all these things and kind of carry the offense. So they've been able to kind of invest at other positions on the field. So I don't know. Eventually it's going to come back to haunt him. He could end up getting seriously hurt one day. I hope not. I love Russell Wilson. And so I don't know. But yeah, so we have him at QB5. I think then we differ a little bit here because I have our consensus right now is Drew Brees at QB6, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe you have him a little lower, don't you?
Yes, I believe I have him at 8 or 9. Let me pull up these here.
Yep, I got him up. So I have him at QB6. You have him at QB9. This is another one that I kind of went back and forth with on how I was going to do this, but I still think Drew Brees has a lot left in the tank. He played in 11 games last year. We know he missed some time. Teddy Bridgewater filled in for him, but he was still fantastic last year. I mean, he still finished with 20.4 fantasy points per game, which was 5th. On a team that was kind of middle of the road with 37.9 pass plays per game. They're a very balanced offense. But I mean, the only thing that he didn't, I mean, you could say that last year they didn't throw the ball deep. He didn't throw the ball deep as much. He only had 33 deep attempts, which was 30th in the league. However, obviously some of that's factoring in the fact that he missed 5 games, but he was still 42.4 deep ball completion percentage, his 112.0 true passer rating. And of those weeks that he played, 7 were QB1 weeks, only 2 QB2 weeks and 1 QB3 week, which I think was one of the weeks when he got knocked out. So there's still lots to like with Drew Brees. They obviously brought in another wide receiver with Emmanuel Sanders. Everybody, all the pieces are still there. Michael Thomas, obviously, Alvin Kamara. We'll see what happens with him as long as he doesn't hold out. So this whole offense is still intact. They have a pretty decent schedule. So I like Drew Brees a lot. I thought about going with somebody else like a Carson Wentz here, but I ended up going with Drew Brees.
I don't hate that. For me, the whole thing is his attempts have just been dropping for the past couple of years. Obviously, last year he didn't play a full 16. But since he had joined the Saints, he only had 2 years And so since that was since 2006, whenever he got to New Orleans, he only had 2 years under 600 pass attempts up until the past 3 years, where 2017, 536, 2018 down to 489. Last year, 378, but like I said, that was only through 11 games. So I think that's just something that's going to continue. Like, we're not going to see him up at this 650, 620 range going forward. With Kamara, he was apparently injured last year. I think they want to lean on that run game a little bit. That defense is still strong. So that to me is just why I don't see him up in that top 6 range. He's not that far off. Like, that's probably like a close clustered tier to me. But like I said, I just don't think the attempts are going to be there. And if you're banking on him getting 72% completion percentage again, which is obviously well within his means, that's just not something I typically want to bank on, is having somebody be one of the most efficient quarterbacks and accurate quarterbacks that we've seen in quite some time. But just a quick side note, because you, sir, got your Scott Fishbowl invite today, so we can stop that sweat. But with the scoring system that has come out for the Scott Fishbowl, Drew Brees is going to be someone who's really interested. Like, I'm really interested to see how early he goes because of the points given and taken away with completions and incompletions. Just a little side note.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that's going to shake out. I'm still going to start really digging into some of that as well. So, but let's talk about Carson Wentz, who you have at 6. Like I said, I could have kind of went either way on, but you have Carson Wentz at 6. I mean, last year it's kind of tough, right? Because he was 13th in fantasy points per game, 40.6 pass plays per game, which was 7th most. He was 10th in deep attempts, 19th in deep ball completion percentage. But there's some other things to talk about here, because I mean, considering the fact that he threw for 4,000 yards, he was 9th in air yards, 27 passing touchdowns, which was fifth most, but he 17th in adjusted air yards per attempt. But he had the 32 drop passes for him, which was 6th most in the league. And I think you look at that, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that they didn't fucking have nobody to throw the ball to, right? It was Zach Ertz.
That is correct.
Dallas Goedert, right? Alshon Jeffrey was hurt. Deshaun Jackson was hurt. They were out here running J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Greg Ward, my man, my DFS god that came alive in the playoffs or down the stretch and in the playoffs, but they didn't have anybody. So you have to sit here and at least give him some credit for what he was able to do in the season he was able to put together with that. And now you factor in this year that they went out and invested heavily in the wide receiver position, not just Jalen Reagor, but they added 2 other wide receivers as well. And so you factor all that stuff in, and Doug Peterson continues to talk up Alshon Jeffrey. He did so again today, saying that he's really impressed with what he's able to do this offseason and getting himself healthy. We'll see when he comes back. We still have time. Alshon really very well could be ready by week 1. We'll see. I think there's still a better chance he ends up on the PUP. But, they're still going to have Alshon, Deshaun Jackson, Jalen Reagor, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, like all those pieces are there, and if they can stay healthy, like, there's room here that Carson Wentz could end up being a top 5 quarterback, and I think that's pretty easy to see.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what I'm buying into here is the bounce back, and with everything that went wrong for them last year, he still had a super respectable year in terms of fantasy wise. I mean, half of his games he was a QB1 during the season. Alshon and Nelson Aguilar were 3rd and 4th in targets on that team, and neither of them played more than 11 games. Miles Sanders was 3rd on the team with reception and receiving yards. Like, he had 2 tight ends leading that team. Now, granted, 2 super talented tight ends that, they deserve all that. But I mean, I think Reagor provides a huge boost to that receiving core. If Deshaun Jackson can be healthy, Marquise Goodwin can, I might be more of a DFS kind of dart throw kind of play. Apparently J-Jaw was super banged up. I mentioned this a couple of times, to the point where, like, he had trouble getting out of bed in the morning. Like, he needed help getting to the bathroom and stuff. So if he can improve on his year last year, like I said, obviously it's still with 2 tight ends. The one thing I will say is losing Brooks is going to be a huge blow to that team. Their guard, who is perennially, a top 5 guy in terms of PFF's grades. So that will be a big blow to them, especially at this time of the year and with everything that is not going on because of COVID and Corona and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how much that affects them. But I just think with the improvements they've made, and if some of those guys can take a step up, that's going to be a huge boost. And he's someone who, when he is healthy, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in this league. And I think if he can stay healthy for 14, 15, 16 games, he's another guy who I could easily see that I would not be surprised about if they're in the top 3 fantasy finishes at the end of the year.
Yeah, then I think you look at them and you say that the fact that what was I gonna say? I fucking forgot what I was gonna fucking say. Yeah, I don't know. So we'll see with that, right? I don't fucking know where I was going with that. I clearly had something to say. I really did. But anyways, let's just move on. Let's move on, right? After I fuck that up. So Deshaun Watson, right? He is the kind of the wild card. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Especially with Carson Wentz going in the 9th round, I think with the value that you're able to get from him and the upside that he brings with the table is what I was going to say. I think 9th round is a little late for him. So if he's still going in the 9th round whenever I'm on the board, like it's going to be, again, another guy that's going to be really hard for me to pass on just because I think he has some significant upside. So let's go on to Shaun Watson. Last year, the biggest obvious loss here is DeAndre Hopkins, right? You lose him. They did replace him though with Randall Cobb, so there is that, right? So that's not a huge drop off or anything like that. But with Deshaun Watson, his 21.2 fantasy points per game were second most. He was 5th in fantasy points per drop back. They also brought in David Johnson, and it's going to be he's so tough to look at because one, Will Fuller can never stay healthy. So if Will Fuller gets hurt, now what are we running out here? Right. And there's just so many red flags with Shaun Watson. Like, I really like Deshaun Watson, but let's be honest, the Texans and mainly Bill O'Brien has really fucked over this entire offense and hasn't really maximized what they should be doing with a quarterback who was on his rookie contract, right? And really trying to surround him with as much talent as possible. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins was already there, but bringing in some other options and some other talent there. Instead, it's just been a wild ride with this, and they continue to give Bill O'Brien more and more opportunities and more power here. So for me, I kind of went back and forth with how I was going to do with Deshaun Watson, because I mean, I could see myself dropping him down a little bit further, but I have him at 7. You have him at 8. So, like I said, is that kind of where you were with Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, man, there's just so many unknowns with that receiving group in general. Then you add in the health issues. Nothing exciting at tight end either. They have a couple of guys who seem to trade off weeks, and they're injured as well. I mean, if there's a legitimate chance we could be looking at Randall Cobb and Kenny Stills as the number 1 and 2 receiver by the end of the year. If Cooks takes one wrong hit, he could be done. If Fuller bangs up his hamstring again or has those lingering soft tissue issues, he could be out for weeks. And, a guy like that who he's not just a speed guy, but that is a big part of his game. Now you're adding in a lingering hamstring injury. Who knows how effective he would be if he's trying to bounce back. So this is the year where we're going to find out just how good Deshaun Watson is. I think he can elevate this room, but man, if one or two of those guys go down, and like I said, you're looking at Kenny Stills and Randall Cobb as the 1 and 2 at the end of the year. That's tough, man.
The one upside that I will say Deshaun Watson still has for him is the Konami code that he still is able to use his legs. He had 413 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns last year, and he was 4th in rush attempts among quarterbacks. So 16 red zone carries. So there is that as well to kind of elevate him a little bit. I think he's going to be running the ball a little bit more than what he's used to. So we'll see how this plays out here with this team. I don't have a lot of faith. I think this defense is going to be really bad as well in Houston. So they've tried about everything they could do to throw away every draft pick that they could get. So I don't know. So I think we're kind of on the same page with Deshaun Watson as well. Now here is kind of where we differ a little bit among our rankings, because for me, Matt Ryan comes in at 9, but I have him at 10 and you have him at 7. So talk to me a little bit about Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about Russell Wilson just being one of those guys who just seems to be undervalued year over year. And I think it's the same thing with Matt Ryan. If you look at what he's done basically over his whole career now, he does seem to kind of have that thing where it's just like, like a QB2 season followed by like a QB13 and a QB3 and then a QB11, one of those kind of things. But even though they added Todd Gurley, there's still questions with the run game and how effective that's going to be. And if Gurley goes down or misses any extended periods or a couple weeks here and there, we saw last year that there's not much they're going to be able to rely on there. I think he was second or third in the league in terms of completion percentage from a clean pocket, and that was with that offensive line kind of being banged up and moved around. A couple pieces moving around here and there. So if that offensive line can come together, that's obviously going to be a huge help for him and the run game. They have the defensive additions that, it's going to improve that unit, but they're still not going to be a shutdown group by any means. That's a high octane division. This is just something where I see the attempts and his history with Dirk Cutter as the OC they've always been a pass first kind of offense. It's not going to stop here. Obviously, with Hayden Hurst coming in to fill the role from Austin Hooper last year, I love that addition for that team. So that's just something where I think you have Julio, you have Calvin Ridley, who some people are talking about. I know you're really high on him. I think Evan Silva has him as like wide receiver 8 or something. He has him as a top 10 guy this year, going along with Julio Jones. So I just love this offense in general, and obviously Matt Ryan is going to be the driving force behind that. So he's someone that I'm super high on. I was a little surprised to see that where he was landing in terms of the of Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. I thought I was going to be much higher on Matt Ryan compared to the field, but as of right now, he is the consensus QB8. So, I mean, obviously, you're not too far off of him. You only have a couple spots down. I only have him one spot higher, but I was a little surprised to see that. What do you have concerns, or they're just the other guys you like ahead of him just a little bit better?
Well, so there are things that I really like, and obviously, like you mentioned, is the fact of how bad that defense is. I think the division they play is going to play a factor with how much they're going to have to throw the ball. They were already first in pass plays per game last year. There is some things that worry me a little bit. I don't put too much stock into schedules, but I mean, they do have a very tough schedules this year. It's the 30th hardest schedule among quarterbacks. I think that plays somewhat of a factor into it. And to be honest with you, I mean, you look at him, and last year there was supposed to be really a smash year for him. I mean, he finished 10th with 17.7 fantasy points per game, but he was 0.38, which was 22nd in fantasy points per drop back. Now, it hurts him the fact that he does not really use his legs. Only 147 rushing yards and 1 rushing touchdown. Obviously, he's not somebody that's ever known for that. But, I mean, 26 passing touchdowns, his 4,400 passing yards, which we know that the dude was fucking crushes. I think he had like 10 300-yard games last year. But he only had 6 QB1 weeks last year, which was a little surprising to me when I started really looking into it. 8 QB2 weeks and 1 QB3 week last year. And that's kind of what you expect with Matt Ryan. Like, I don't think he is somebody that I wouldn't hate to have him. Like, if I ended up getting him, if I could get him in like the 10th or 11th round or something like that, I wouldn't hate it at all. I like the weapons with Julio and Calvin Ridley and Hunter Hurst. I think the passing volume is going to be there, but just efficiency sometimes kills me. And he has never been very good in terms of red zone. I mean, last year he was 36th in red zone completion percentage last year, which is a bit of a issue with him. Obviously, Julio never been a guy who's gotten many opportunities. You always wonder, I've never thought it was a Julio thing. That would be ridiculous. I've always kind of thought it's been something that's hurt Matt Ryan. So we'll see. And then with the addition with Todd Gurley, I think that does help the offense a little bit with what they had last year at the running back position. So I do like Matt Ryan, but some of these other guys I like a little bit more. And one of them for me is Matt Stafford, right? I think I'm higher on him than just about anybody I've seen. I have him at QB8. And you have him at QB10, which isn't that low, which is probably still higher than probably most of the consensus on Matt Stafford. But I absolutely love some Matthew Stafford this year. If you go back, now it was a very small sample size with him, but in 8 games, he averaged 20.8 fantasy points per game. his fantasy points per dropback was 5th best. He had top 5 quarterback. He was top 5 quarterback in 6 of 8 weeks last year. So there's really a lot to like here with this team. And they pretty much bring the entire offense back. They added DeAndre Swift, obviously. So I really like Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford's another one of those guys that is always undervalued, always underlooked. Like, he's going ridiculously low right now in terms of where I think he should be going. I think he's going like in the 10th round in terms of ADP, 10th or 11th round. And I just think that's a little bit ridiculous with some of the guys that are going ahead of him. And I think he's kind of a lock as a QB1, right? And when I'm drafting, he's the first guy. If I'm, in the later rounds that I am locking in that I want to get my hands on.
Yeah, I really like Stafford this year as well. You were talking about his ADP a little bit. As of right now, that is at 10:02, coming off it as QB 13 according to FF Calculator. If you look at what he was doing last year, he was QB 6 through week 9. Then obviously he had the injury. QB 3 in points per game. He averaged 36 attempts per game. He's someone who, you're not going to get too much disagreement out of me. He's someone I also really like. Obviously, our guy, Derek Brown, is also high on him as well. Then if you look at, so you're talking about him kind of being all over the place and a lot of people being low on him. Looking at the Fantasy Pros consensus, his highest rank was 8, so I'm sure that is you, and his lowest is 18. So kind of all over the board. Like I said, QB 13 in mock drafts right now. And he's someone I really like. And I think if somebody like TJ Hawkinson can take a step forward, obviously DeAndre Swift is a really nice addition for the passing game as well. And it is, as well as a running game. And our guy Nate Henry, our resident Detroit Lion fan, was on. I think it was during the live draft show, and he was talking about some of the losses that they've been having across the offensive line. That defense still isn't going to be great, even with the addition of Okudah. Obviously, they lost Slay to the Eagles, so I think we're going to see the same 32 to 36 pass attempts per game. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's going to be someone who smashes what his current ADP is.
I completely agree on that. So, he was on pace, like I said, for 5,000 yards and 36 passing touchdowns before he got hurt. So there is a lot to like with Matt Stafford. So let's go ahead and jump on to the old man, right? The old Twitter today, they released his photos with the Bucks. Now he's tried them on with Tom Brady. Looked a little weird. I'm not going to lie, seeing Tom Brady in a Bucks uniform.
Was weird.
Especially not one that was photoshopped. But he is kind of an interesting guy this year because I don't know. So if you look at him last year, I think most people consensus with him last year that he was fucking horrible, right? And he kind of was. Even though I think he finished as a QB1, he was 16.4 in fantasy points per game, 18th in fantasy points per dropback, 88.6 true passer rating, which was 17th. Now, it should be mentioned that they had no weapons last year. They had Josh Gordon for a little bit of time, Antonio Brown for a week, and then it was Julian Edelman and a bunch of nobodies, right? N'Keal Harry, but N'Keal Harry didn't come. He was sat out for a lot of the year because of injury. However, but if you look, so last year, Tom Brady was QB1 for 6 weeks, but none of those were after week 8. He was a QB2 or worse in every week following that. So he had a really hot start to the season and then really fell off. However, we're putting him in Tampa Bay with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and OJ Howard and Rob Gronkowski and Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson is also there as well, with the running backs and everything else. Like, there's a lot to like here with Tom Brady's situation, but it is, again, we're talking about a quarterback who is 43, and he's kind of a tough guy to judge. But I know a lot of people have said that Mike Evans is going to be dead. If you look at his deep ball last year, he was 41.7 deep ball completion percentage, which was top 10 in the league. So, he still can air it out the deep ball a little bit. So we'll see how this works out with him. But where are you on Tom Brady?
I like him, man. The only thing that's kind of holding me back from that is just his price. He is going in the 8th round as QB 10. If he falls a little bit, I would like that price more, and I'd be more intrigued. But from kind of what I've seen so far is more of Brady is going to try to fit into what Arians does instead of vice versa. And we've seen what that offense has been. You just mentioned some of his deep passing. I think he was like 13th in deep attempts last year, so he can still sling it. 613 attempts last year, had close to 600 2 years prior to that. So I still think he has a little bit of tank left. I don't think he's toast yet. Look at somebody like Chris Godwin and what he's going to be able to do underneath, along with Gronk, along with the other tight ends they have. So that's nothing that I'm too worried about. Like I said, to me, it just comes down to his price right now. I would rather wait a little bit and get somebody like Stafford or Carson Wentz, other than Tom Brady at their respective prices. But I'm excited to see what Brady can do. Like you said, last year statistically does not look like a good year, but he literally had nothing on that team to help him out, and that is going to be the complete opposite. I'm not much of a historian when it comes to fantasy football, but I mean, has there ever been a time that he's had this many weapons surrounding him to this extent? Obviously, he had Randy Moss for a little bit, and a couple of guys like that, Hernandez and Gronk for a little bit, but top to bottom, has there been a year like this for Brady?
Well, I mean, so then they also had Wes Welker in that year with Randy Moss.
Right.
That's probably the best year. I mean, that's probably the best weapons that he's had. I think you can make a case whenever it was, Julian Edelman and Rob Gronkowski, but I don't know. Like, I think this might be the best collection of talent that he's had since he's been in the league.
And future Hall of Famer Keyshawn Vaughn, obviously.
Yes, showing up. Yep. No, ding, ding, ring the bell, ring the Keyshawn Vaughn bell. You can't have a podcast without talking about Keyshawn Vaughn, right? So, but no. I'm
really surprised I had to be the one to bring him up, to be honest.
I mean, sometimes you got to do it. But, yeah, I hate the ADP, right? 8th round, I can't mess with that.
I can't do it.
No, I'm out on that. So, yeah. So, let's move on. And this is another one where I have Josh Allen. So I don't know if you made a change because now I see that it's Aaron Rodgers here. But I have Aaron Rodgers at 11th. You have him at 14. So for me, like, it's tough because I go back and forth on Aaron Rodgers because Aaron Rodgers was not great last year. We know that. But it wasn't necessarily him. It was also more the fact that they ran the ball a lot and they kind of took the ball out of his hands at times. So for you are lower on him than I am. What is your concerns with Aaron Rodgers? Is it the fact that you don't think they're going to throw the ball enough, or what is it?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think it's the fact that they didn't do anything. As much as I love Alan Lazard, they didn't add anything. Like, they didn't do anything to help him out in terms of that. I think Adams is obviously set up to smash this year. I think he should be the clear receiver 2, receiver 3 coming off the boards behind Michael Thomas. Like, they just haven't done enough, and they seem like they're like LaFleur wants to be someone who is more balanced. Obviously, they went out and got A.J. Dillon and kind of blew all of our minds after the Jordan Love pick as well. So that it just seems to me like they're going to rely on the run game for whatever reason, and they're not going to be putting the ball into Aaron Rodgers' hands as much. So that to me is I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how many more attempts he's going to have, and then behind Adams and Lazard, there's nothing there that I'm all that excited about.
Would you be surprised if I told you they were actually 8th in the league in attempts last year, and then you may think to yourself, because that's what I would think, is that well those are probably a lot of short dump offs and stuff like that because they weren't able to stretch the ball. But he was actually number 2 in deep ball attempts, and he was 9th in average depth of target last year.
It just doesn't feel the same for whatever reason. You know what I mean? Like I know that he was still up there with attempts, but like I don't know, man. Like, something just like doesn't feel the same with that offense. I don't know what it is. There's nothing statistical I have to really back this up. It's more of like a gut feel. And like I said, I don't know what it is, but like
you don't
something
think that I mean, I know this is like completely narrative, but you don't think you're going to get pissed off? Like, let me show you motherfuckers who just drafted my backup why I'm still the man, Aaron Rodgers. Because Aaron Rodgers is definitely that guy. Like he's
I want to see.
There's a lot of players that probably wouldn't be that guy who are going to come out and do that, but he's that guy. He's that guy that I'm going to shove it down your throat and tell you why, and show you why I'm still one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
I am 1,000% here for Rogue Rodgers season. Just calling whatever fucking plays he wants and just just literally doing whatever he wants. I can see that, but like I said, like that's just something. Just like something doesn't smell right.
Well,
so
I think it's
there's
more
something weird in the air.
It's because they didn't do anything to improve this offense. I mean, they added, like you mentioned, A.J. Dillon. It's Devontae Adams. If anything happens to them, we're back to running out Alan Lazard and Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Equanimeous St. Brown, who got hurt last year. But I don't know. Maybe one of these guys does come on and become a viable wide receiver too. I know he's really talked up Alan Lazard. We'll see on Equanimeous St. Brown. He was kind of a guy that people were kind of excited about pre-drafts and everything. Well, whenever he came out, he was obviously hurt last year. So I don't know, but you're right. There's not a lot to like about this offense outside of Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. Obviously Aaron Jones is still there, but yeah, I think that has more to do with it than anything. He just kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouth versus like he's not really exciting. And I think for people, they look at him and say, well, his ceiling isn't that high, or and stuff like that. However, I mean, Aaron Rodgers for years has been a guy that you could get you were drafting in the second and third round, fourth round, right? His ADP isn't terrible for somebody with I still believe has some upside in him. And, another year removed from injury, he is somebody that can, do a little bit with on the ground. Again, he's not somebody that's going to crush it in terms of rushing yards or anything like that, but he is a decent scrambler. Another year removed from injury. He did play 16 games last year. So I don't know. We'll see with Aaron Rodgers. It's just hard for me to have him. I kind of went back and forth. I kind of had him outside of a little bit, like QB 13, but I was like, you know what? No, I still think there's enough there. I think he can do enough with it. I think this entire division, I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more, and that's why I'm at QB 11.
Are you paying his current price of 807 in drafts?
I honestly don't hate that. Like I said, I still think that he has some pretty significant upside. I probably wouldn't. This is a situation where I would just wait and draft Carson Wentz around later, who I like more, or I would take a shot at Matt Stafford, who I also like more, who are going later than him. So that's who I would go with. But I honestly wouldn't be surprised if his ADP falls a little bit further than that. So I mean, I think that's pretty much where we're at with it. But the last guy I did want to talk about, and it's not because I know where your quarterback 12 is Josh Allen. I have him much lower than probably most people do. I have him at QB 15. And so I guess I'll tell you why I have him at QB 15. Even despite the fact that I do think adding Stephon Diggs, I think definitely helps him. I still have serious questions with Josh Allen and his accuracy. He has continued to be that guy. Now, what has saved him, honestly, is the fact that he had 510 rushing yards last year, which was third, 9 rushing touchdowns, which I do expect some regression in that number as well. And if that happens, if we get any regression in his rushing numbers, I mean, he despite the fact that he has a cannon for his arm, he was 33rd in deep ball completion percentage last year. But he was 8th in deep ball attempts, but he's just not accurate. And then 34th in clean pocket completion percentage, which is mind-blowing to me. 34th whenever you have a clean pocket and completion percentage. Like, that seems crazy to me for a starting quarterback in the NFL, that when you have a clean pocket, that you're only completing 34% of your passes. He's 26th in red zone attempts. So for me, there's a lot of negatives here. He only had 20 passing touchdowns. Again, 3,000 passing yards. Now, again, I understand you adding Stephon Diggs into the mix, plus the Konami code that he carries. So maybe 15th is a little bit low, but he still was only 10th in fantasy points per game with that. 10th in fantasy points per dropback, and his 87.7 true passer rating was 19th. So I just don't love Josh Allen, and I think that he's very hit or miss. I mean, it's kind of proof is in the pudding. He had 7 QB1 weeks and 8 QB2 weeks last year. Very volatile. Again, I do think Stephon Diggs helps and raises offense a little bit, but I don't think it's a game changer for them. I still think they want to lean on the run. And I also think that they want to lean on that defense, which is still one of the best in the league. Not to mention the fact that they also have the 31st hardest schedule for quarterbacks. Not to mention they have the worst schedule for weeks 14 through 16. And again, I don't like looking too much at that. I take that with a grain of salt because so many different things can happen over a course of a season, but it is something to kind of monitor a little bit. So for that's why I have Josh Allen so low. I just think there's better quarterbacks and quarterbacks that I'd rather have. I know Bills Nation or Bills Mafia or whatever they call themselves is going to come with pitchforks, because anytime you talk bad about a Buffalo Bill, you better be ready, because nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, right?
Yeah, man, like, it's not going to be pretty when you draft him. Like, he's someone who, like, typically the guys you have on your fantasy team, like, those are the guys you want to watch, right? You want to put on the game, see how they're doing. Like, if you draft Josh Allen, do not do that. Like, you are not going to like what you see. But his rookie year, 631 rushing yards, 8 touchdowns. You talked about last year, 510 rushing yards, 9 touchdowns. Can that regress a little bit? Sure. But if with as bad as especially his deep passing was, and kind of like that's what he's known for, is being able to chuck it over their mountains. If he can just connect on a couple of those, I think that can offset any sort of drop he has with his rushing yards. Unless for whatever reason they just decide to completely cut back on that, which I don't see that. Rookie year, 89 rush attempts, and last year, 109 rushing attempts. So I still think he's probably going to be around like that 100 range. The touchdowns are probably what is going to regress the most if something does regress out of the category. I think the attempts and the yards are going to remain relatively stable. Like I said, if he can just hit on a couple of those deep passes, Stephon Diggs definitely helps. But again, he's not the most accurate guy. So I think if you thought you saw some blow-ups in Minnesota with Steph Diggs and Kirk Cousins, I think we are in for a treat whenever, he's 5 yards away from Josh Allen. He throws it, out of the stadium.
Yeah. No, 100%. I am all here for some Steph Diggs just getting in that ass, because that's what he does. He does not put up with it for too long, and eventually he is going to explode, because they do have some decent weapons. Steph Diggs, John Brown, who is always criminally undervalued, Cole Beasley in the slot. Like, I think Dawson Knox is a nice addition. I don't know. We could see him take a step forward, but the dude has just never been accurate unless he's been able to correct some of that. Is my biggest concern with them. But like I said, what gives him a decent floor every week is the fact that that he has that ability to pick up yards on the ground. So I don't know. That's why I have him a little bit lower than some of the other guys that I have ahead of him. But so I think that wraps up our top 12 quarterbacks discussion. And so let's go ahead and just kind of jump into some late round guys that we're kind of looking at. Some of these guys have kind of talked about a little bit, so I don't want to go too far into them, but a couple of the guys that I don't think we really have had much of a discussion on. So Daniel Jones, I know we've talked about a couple of times. I'm still right here with Daniel Jones. He played, again, 13 games last year. It wasn't fantastic. He did have those 18 fumbles, which is fucking ridiculous. To be honest, 18 fumbles. Like, how does that happen? But to be honest with you, I was looking at it. I mean, there's some other quarterbacks. I mean, Carson Wentz had 16 fumbles last year. So I don't expect that. But he, out of those 13 games, he had 5 300-yard passing games. He had 24 passing touchdowns in 13 games, which is pretty respectable for a rookie quarterback. 3,000 passing yards. Like we mentioned, he never played a full game with the full complement of his weapons, getting everybody back healthy. If Sterling Shepard can get over this concussion problem, Darius Slayton taking another step forward, which was a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. Evan Ingram, if for whatever reason can stay fucking healthy, which has never been able to do in his career. I think all those things together, coupled with the fact that this defense is going to be really bad, they're going to be playing from behind. So, and also, like I mentioned, like Daniel Jones, low key, was pretty efficient last year as a runner, right? He only had 45 carries last year, but he ended up with 279 rushing yards, which was 7th most among all quarterbacks. So there's a lot to like there in terms of his upside as a runner too. So I like Daniel Jones. I like where you can get him in drafts, and I think he's going to be another guy. If Matt Stafford comes off the board, he's going to be the first guy I'm looking for.
I currently have him at 17 in drafts right now. He is quarterback 16 at 1107. For me, I just don't see him as someone. I know he had a nice rookie year. I just don't see him as someone who's going to be going to be able to consistently elevate. Like if Shepard goes down again, like those concussion, those neck issues are real with him. If he goes down again, Evan Ingram can't stay healthy. All of a sudden, again, you're looking at just Golden Tate and Slayton. And as much as we both like Slayton, this is a Darius Slayton friendly podcast. I don't look at him as someone who I want to be leading my receiving group as like the unquestioned number one every single week in, week out, without having somebody like Shepard or Ingram to take some heat off of him. And maybe unless we see something like a Christian McCaffrey-esque season for Barkley as a pass catcher, which is definitely within his range of outcomes, I think. But between anybody in the NFL right now that can do that, I think you're looking at McCaffrey and Barkley, right? Like, I don't think there's going to be too many other guys outside of that. But like I said, he's just not someone who I look at and I think like, okay, he can carry this passing offense and he can elevate the receiving group around him.
Yeah, I see those concerns, but I just think overall, I think he's a safe option as a late round target, especially somebody that can use his legs as well. And we've talked a lot about how that really can help out a quarterback, especially help his floor. So that's why I like Daniel Jones so much, and I think he has the ability to take another step forward this year. And I think he has that kind of big game ability in him. We kind of saw that last year with him, where he was really boom or bust, but he obviously wasn't somebody that you drafted. So that's what I like about Daniel Jones. So let's move on from there for the next one. Let's go with your guy, Big Ben. I mean, the dude, I don't know if he's going to stay healthy. I don't know what's going to happen if he doesn't. We'll be looking at, I guess, Mason Rudolph again or something. But you have him at QB 13. So his expert consensus ranking is quarterback 15, and he's going as QB 15 in drafts in the 11th round. What do you like so much about him?
I guess this is something we should have mentioned at the outset of this, but we did these rankings based on where we think they'll finish, right? So like, this isn't necessarily how we would draft them and where we would draft them. We did these based on where we think they'll finish. With him, man, I think it's just the fact of Juju is going to be back healthy. If one of those receivers behind him can step up in any way, shape, or form, that's going to be a huge help. Depending on how they use McFarland, I'm not as high on him as you are. I don't see him as a guy that should be viewed as a workhorse kind of running back of something.
You watch your mouth, okay? You watch your dirty little mouth when you talk about Anthony McFarland, okay?
I think he could be good as that change of pace receiving back, but not as a 18 to 22 touch running back. But anyway, and I think the addition of Eric Ebron, the Steelers have kind of been searching for that athletic playmaker at the tight end position for a while now. They tried Ladarius Green, tried Vance McDonald. Neither of them have really been able to get it done. I think that could be something we see Eric Ebron step into, and he could be a really nice late tight end kind of target for drafts. But like I said, man, it's just with Juju coming back healthy, Deontay Johnson, although I'm not as high on him as he's been kind of picking up a lot of steam and gaining hype. I feel like every time I log into twitter.com, I see something about, got to pump up Deontay Johnson this year. But if I think with Juju being healthy, that is just going to help out the rest of that receiving group. And if Big Ben can stay healthy, I think that defense, we typically don't see defenses stay as dominant as the Steelers defense was on a year-to-year basis. We saw the fall off with the Jags a couple of years ago. So if that defense falls off, that offensive line is pretty shaky, which obviously doesn't help out Ben at all in terms of his health if he gets banged up. But might be something where the running game isn't as efficient as we would want it to be. So if he has to sling the rock a little bit more, I think he's someone who could be sitting right outside of the QB1 conversation by year's end.
Yeah, I just don't have any trust in him staying healthy at all, but we'll see.
No.
Do you think that they should really be the team that's looking at Cam Newton right now?
I mean, they've kind of tried, right? Apparently, they offered more money to Andy Dalton and offered more money to Jameis Winston, and both of them said, "No, thank you. I will take less and go somewhere else." So, if Ben goes down, I as a Steeler fan, I just want to see this whole thing go down in flames. I've been rooting for it for a while. And then last year, this defense comes along and plays lights out, and it gives everyone that little etch of hope of, hey, look, see what we did with Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph. Now, just imagine if Big Ben stayed healthy. Like, so if Big Ben goes down and they can't make a playoff push, I want to see this thing go down in a ball of flames.
Yeah, and just see them completely tear it up, rip it all up, looking at probably James Conner gone next year, which opens the door for Anthony McFarland to be the lead back. Because I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, Anthony McFarland's 5'8", 208. That is plenty big enough to tote the rock as a 3-down back. But
it has nothing to do with his size. I just don't think he's that kind of. He's not someone I would want to give all those touches to. I think he is more athlete than he is running back.
Guess we'll see. But because he's going to be starting, I guess bold prediction. I think that he ends up being a league winner this year. I think that's really what I think about Anthony McFarland. So we'll talk about, but I don't want to get to the next. We're not talking about running back. So, anyways, so yeah, that's my concern with him. I have Big Ben at QB 17. Now, one that I can't seem to wrap my head around at all is Kirk Cousins. Right? Don't get it. I have him at QB 18, which I could actually move him up a few more slots, and that would really still feel fine about it. He's going at QB 24. His expert consensus ranking on Fantasy Pros is QB 20. It's going in the 14th round. He's almost going undrafted. I don't understand this one. Okay, and for a lot of reasons. So one of the reasons for me is, yes, if you look at him last year, he was 16.2 fantasy points per game, but he was 9th in fantasy points per dropback. His 110.6 true passer rating was 3rd in the league. He was 40.4 deep ball completion percentage, which is 10th on only 24 attempts, or 17th in deep ball attempts, but they were 24th in pass attempts, 3,600 yards, 26 passing touchdowns, and 1 rushing touchdown last year for him. They had the 5th easiest schedule. However, the one issue that I do have, they did lose Stephon Diggs, but they added Justin Jefferson. We know that this is a very friendly Justin Jefferson podcast. Absolutely love Justin Jefferson, and I think he has the ability to be the best rookie wide receiver this year. And then Adam Thielen becoming healthy is also being underdrafted, but we'll talk about that. And then Irv Smith, but they lost so much along that defense. They lost Everson Griffin. They lost Linval Joseph. They lost Trey Wayans. They lost Xavier Rhodes. Now, they did spend 9 draft picks on the defensive side of the ball. They brought in TCU's Jeff Gadney, 31st overall, and then they also addressed the defensive back with Mississippi State's Cameron Dantzler in the 89th overall, right? But nine of their draft picks were spent along the defense, but unless these guys really pick it up quickly, I think there's going to be some growing pains along this defense. Now, they do still have some other guys like Hunter, who's an absolute monster. Harrison Smith is still there. But I still think this defense takes a step back from what we typically see. And if that happens, I think they have to throw the ball a little bit more, coupled in with the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with Dalvin Cook. It's still way too early. I know he said he felt disrespected by the offer they offered him. I don't know what they offered him. I hope he's not hoping for Ezekiel Elliott money, and if he is, I hope the Vikings tell him to kick rocks, because I don't think he's worth that. I don't think any running back in this day and age is worth that, outside of probably Christian McCaffrey, and that's just because how versatile he is as a pass catcher. However, I think he still should try to get his. I think there is a real chance that he does hold out. We'll see, and it's too early to call. But if we get to this point, and if we're to this point and we're in late August and it looks for real that Dalvin Cook is going to sit out, I think that's only good things for Kirk Cousins. They had the 5th easiest schedule for quarterbacks. So there's a lot to like here with Kirk Cousins, right? I know that losing Stephon Diggs is a bit of an issue, but I really like the fact that they added Justin Jefferson. And I think with some of the other options they have, I think this can be a pretty solid offense, along with Kyle Rudolph, who's still there. So I like Kirk Cousins a lot. He's almost free. And I think that he is somebody that can well pay off that draft capital.
Yeah, he could. The issue I have with Cousins is I just don't see the weekly ceiling from him. Like I think at that point, like it doesn't really matter like with where you're getting him, because he basically is free right now. There's only one quarterback that is being drafted after him, according to Fantasy Football Calculator, and that is Teddy Bridgewater at QB 25, going one spot after him. Kirk Cousins at 1407, who has the same ADP somehow, some way as Tua in Miami, and that one doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why Tua is going at the same ADP as Kirk Cousins. Like I said, for me, it's just I don't see the ceiling with him. I think like where you're drafting him is kind of like what you should be expecting, like on a weekly basis. I do think he outperforms that ADP, but like he's just someone who I'd feel a lot better streaming. Like I think if you take Kirk Cousins at that point, you're just going to be cycling through quarterbacks week after week, which is obviously a viable strategy. You can definitely get away with doing that. But I think that's the reason why he's going that late is I don't see the ceiling with him. And there are just a couple other options where I think you might be able to get that higher volatility, higher range of outcomes outside of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just think that he is being undervalued. And depending on what kind of league you're in, but I would have no problem taking Kirk Cousins at the end of a draft. And like you said, you can easily stream quarterback. It's a very easy thing. It's one reason why you should take a quarterback late and kind of take a chance on some of these guys, because if they don't pan out, you can always find another option. So, and it's not going to kill you whatsoever. So anyways, let's go ahead and move on from there and try to wrap this thing up a little bit. The next guy on the list that we have here, we have a couple more guys. I wanted to hit on Ryan Tannehill because both of us are lower on him than consensus by a lot. He's right now QB 17 on Fantasy Pros consensus rankings. We have him at QB. I have him at QB 25. You have him at QB 27. His ADP is QB 22, so it's not as bad, but he's going 13-11. What is your thoughts on Ryan Tannehill? And I'm sure they match up with mine, because mine is I think he regresses a lot this year. I don't think that you're going to see the same sort of efficiency that you saw from him last year, not even close. And so for me, I just don't believe in Ryan Tannehill all that much. And QB 17 is ridiculous to me in terms of, I think there's just so many other quarterbacks that I'd rather have than Ryan Tannehill.
Yep, that's exactly it. Like he was on like an almost a historic run in terms of his efficiency and everything else that he was doing. I like that's just not something that's going to typically carry over with any quarterback, and I'm certainly not going to bank on Ryan Tannehill being able to carry that efficiency over from one year to the next. So even if they do have to open up the offense a little bit more, I don't think that's what they want to do. Maybe they have to do it from falling behind in games a little bit, but Ryan Tannehill is not the horse I'm going to tie that buggy to in order for carrying my team. So that's why I have him so low. Is he was the reason why he performed as well as he did was strictly based off of efficiency. And like I said, that's just not something where I'm going to go into wanting to draft somebody with that kind of efficiency and just kind of hope that pans out for a second year in a row.
I completely agree. And I think you look at the weapons, I do think AJ Brown can, he's obviously there, but he's a second year wide receiver. I mean, who else do they have? Corey Davis is still there, who's never taken off. Obviously, Jonnu Smith, who I'd love, but I just think there's a lot of red flags there with that offense and not something I love. So I will have zero Ryan Tannehill, and I would not want to invest in him at all. So let's go ahead and move on. We have two more guys. I want to talk about mine, which is Nick Foles. He's almost going like he's going undrafted, and most people aren't even drafting him. Hell, you didn't even draft him. If you want to look at that or draft him, rank him. Excuse me. Yeah, you didn't rank Nick Foles, so that's how much disrespect. Now, I'm assuming that's because you think that because we're waiting to see what's going to happen between him and Mitch Trubisky. I would be surprised if Mitch Trubisky started the year as a starter because, one, the amount of money that Nick Foles is getting paid, and I think they blatantly went out and traded for him for a reason. So Listen, I think with the weapons that he has there, with Allen Robinson, who is an absolute beast, with Anthony Miller, I think there's a lot to like there with Tariq Cohen as a pass catcher. I think there's a lot to like there. And I think Nick Foles wins this job. And if he does, I feel like that this is an offense that can really take off. He knows that system with Matt Nagy there. He was there with him in Kansas City. Is the same offense. It's a very similar offense to what Andy Reid runs. Nick Foles was in Kansas City for a year, so he knows this system. So he's going to be able to come right in, hit the ground running. There's a lot to like with Nick Foles, and I think his upside is a lot higher than QB 22 when you factor in the weapons that he has there. So I do like Nick Foles, and I think that he's somebody, if I was in a 16-team league or something like that I would kind of be looking to target.
Yeah, I just didn't rank him solely off the fact of I just have no idea how that's going to shake out with between him and Trubisky. But you're right. If I knew right now, if Nagy came out and said that Foles is going to be our guy going forward for the year unless something happened, I would also have him around that 20 to 22 range where you have him right now. I love the fact that, whenever I've been logging into Twitter the past couple of days, all the Allen Robinson love, especially coming from Matt Harmon with everything he does with perception, and just talking about how good he's been, especially last year. If our guy Anthony Miller can stay healthy for an entire year, he came on at the end of the year. Like you said, you already mentioned Tariq Cohen and guys like that. So I do think his upside would be obviously higher than 22 where you have him, and he's someone I'd be buying into if I knew that he was gonna be the guy.
Yeah, that's what I assume. I figured that had something to do with it. So, like I said, I am ranking him with the assumption that he is going to beat out Mitchell Trubisky. So, let's hit on our last guy, which I don't think we have to talk about him too much. I think this has been a pretty heavy Teddy Bridgewater podcast for the last couple of months, where we've hit on quite a bit of times.
Correct.
But it's still surprising to me that his ADP has not risen higher than it has, because he is currently going QB 25 up and pretty much undrafted. Because his ranking is the same as QB 25. That really surprised me. You have him at QB 19. I think I have him at QB 23. He's another guy that I could kind of move up here in that range, just because of the fact that we know that they're going to want to throw the football, and their defense is going to be atrocious with everything they lost. Like, that defense is a shell of itself. They pretty much lost everything, and so they're going to have to throw the football. Now, I know that the thought process with Bridgewater, and the same with me, has always been that he's a game manager. But I do think that there's some room here for them to have to throw the ball more, and so we'll see on that. But why don't you tell us why you love Teddy B?
Yeah, that one didn't make sense to me either. I thought I would kind of be like level with how everybody else had him ranked, but I was surprised to see that I was as high in terms of consensus compared to everybody else. But the thing is, like, I do think he's kind of like that game manager, right? Like, I'm not expecting him to come in and like all of a sudden just light everything up, but it's the offense with Joe Brady coming in. Obviously, Matt Rule coming from Baylor, that spread offense. Both of them ran spread offenses, and the weapons that are around him. Like, he's not going to have to go out and do too much. Like, he didn't do anything crazy with the Saints whenever he was on the run that he was on. And I think it's the situation he's kind of been dropped into here as well. Is he's not going to have to go out and make high difficulty throws. He's not going to have to throw it 15, 20, 30 yards down the field. He's going to be able to get away with throwing, with having like that dot of 7 to 9 yards, and just letting DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, and Ian Thomas just do the damage for him. That's going to make his stats look a lot better than what they are. So, and like you said, that defense was decimated, even though they are the first team in the NFL in the modern era to spend every single draft pick on defense. I still don't think that's gonna amount to much unless they have some kind of crazy year. But even so, we talked about that division earlier. high octane division, so they're gonna have to throw that around. So that's kind of where I fall on Teddy. Is I'm not expecting him to come in and be much more than a game manager. It's just the offense and the situation that he's been surrounded in that I'm buying into.
No, I agree. I think that there's a lot of things there that you can look at it and say how he could end up working out. Much, and he's absolutely free. You take a shot on him if he doesn't end up working out, then you move on from him. But all the weapons that are there, like you mentioned, Christian McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Ian Thomas. So there's a lot to like there in terms of weapons as well. So yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up the quarterback discussion. Do you have anything else that you want to talk about?
I don't think so, man. I think we covered a bunch of that. Oh, two guys. Tell me how you feel about these two. Gardner Minshew and Jimmy G. Just give me some quick thoughts on them, because they were two guys who I wasn't exactly sure how to rank, kind of like two guys where I had trouble kind of like flip-flopping them back and forth.
So it's tough, right? Because I think Jimmy Garoppolo could be somebody that could be a little bit higher. I think I'm at QB 19 with Garoppolo. But I just don't think they throw the ball that much. I don't think they need to. I think their defense is still really good. Now, if their defense takes a step backwards, which is possible, because I mean, from year to year, there's usually a lot of variance in terms of defense. So if that defense does take a step backwards, they lost to Forrest Buckner. But they added some pieces on that offense, adding Brandon Ayuk. Hopefully, it can be more of the number 2 wide receiver. I do think that him and Deebo Samuel aren't all that different, but I think their skill sets are a little bit different. But I think that neither one of them are like true X wide receivers. But George Kittle's still there, so there's lots to like in terms of the pass catchers and everything else. But I just don't think they throw the ball enough. I think they still try to run the ball as much as possible, and I don't think they really trust Jimmy G to really put him in that situation. It's hard to really get behind that, but I think that they actually have the best schedule for fantasy quarterbacks this year as well. So I don't hate Jimmy G, but I'm just not really excited about it. I don't think he has a very high ceiling, and I don't even know if he has a really great floor either. So I just think there's a much better options. Now, Gardner Minshew, I think, is somebody that can kind of go over the place. I'm not that high on Gardner Minshew. I know there's people out there that Minshew mania and are all about it. I don't hate the weapons that are there. We talked about DJ Chark. I think he is a beast, and D.D. Westbrook is still there. But I'm not high on him. There's just so many other quarterbacks that are kind of going around him. And so I'm not as high on Gardner Minshew. I have him at QB 27. You have him at QB 23. I would rather have Phillip Rivers. I'd rather have Teddy Bridgewater. I'd rather have Joe Burrow. I'd rather have Drew Lock easily. I already mentioned Kirk Cousins. I would much rather have. So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of quarterbacks that I'd rather have than Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like I said, they were just those are two guys who, kind of looking at some later round guys who I've seen also get the buzz like you were talking about, and I just wasn't exactly sure what to do with them.
Yeah, I think I'm out on both of those guys, but so I don't know. So anyways, this is a good discussion. I mean, we are mid-June, right? We're not that far away, though, really, to be honest with you, until August. It'll be here very, very quickly. Scott Fishbowl's not that far away. Draft for that, is a couple of weeks away as well. So, yeah. So like I said, tune in on Thursday. We are going to be talking about the tight end rankings, which those are always super exciting. But I think this year we've kind of talked about, I think the tight ends a little bit more exciting than what they have been in years past. So
for sure,
it'll be kind of fun to talk about some of those guys. We've talked about some of them already, but we'll kind of go a little bit more in depth on some of them. So again, I really appreciate everybody checking out the show. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. It really helps us out. It really helps out growing the show. If there's anything you guys want to hear. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I was thinking about this today. There's a lot of shows out there that they just kind of regurgitate information that they hear from other places, and nobody really wants to pull their balls out and set them on the table, right? As they say. And I feel like we do that. Like, I don't feel like that we follow the herd mentality. I try my hardest not to follow that and try to watch that kind of stuff, because I think that that's what you get caught in. Like, you could pretty much watch a lot of, or listen or watch a lot of shows on YouTube, or listen to shows on, or listen to podcasts, and you end up finding out that a lot of the information is the same information you just heard on other podcasts. And I think that really annoys the shit out of me. And I feel like people should be more put themselves out there and not be sheep. And if you have a take that people consider hot, put it out there, right? Because we all get shit wrong. And I respect people far more that are willing to just kind of go out there and kind of stand by their take and not be wishy-washy about it. Because at the end of the day, we're doing this, for entertainment for people and stuff like that. But we're also trying to help people win championships and try to people win and get people better at this. And that's what we're trying to do. So nobody wants to hear your flimsy take and something that you're not really all that behind. And if someone were to question you on it, you're going to back off of it completely. So I feel like that's something that we do a really good job of here on this podcast and on this show, is because I will argue you to death on any take that I have, and that's just what I do. I am smart enough, if I ever feel like that I'm wrong on something, I will admit it, but I am going to go down with my ship, and I think that is a quality that we are missing in the fantasy community.
Hashtag nuts on the table.
There we go. Let's start using that. Let's make that thing nuts on the table, because that's what you got to do sometimes. You got to drop them out and just let people know. You got to stop being afraid. People are so afraid of putting out their goddamn take all the time, and it irritates me. It's like, I respect the hell out of people, even if it's crazy. Now, if you're just trying to be super fucking crazy, you're like, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to be QB1 this year. That's stupid, right? Now you're just trying to say some dumb stuff. But like, if you can support your take and have an opinion on it, or if it's against the grain, like say like, for example, I don't know, anything like I can tell you, like, every year there seems to be something like, remember Lamar Miller, hype year when he went to Houston, everyone was like, oh, Lamar Miller is going to be a top 5 running back. Everyone was excited about Lamar Miller. Yeah. Isaiah Crowell with the Browns happened, right? Everybody's excited about, because what happens is it's like an echo chamber, right? And you have like Evan Silva, who I greatly respect, or JJ Zachariason, who I greatly respect. You have these like 5 to 10 guys who are kind of the top, right? And they say something and it trickles down. And all of a sudden you start seeing all these articles and people push it off as their own original idea. And usually it's not. It's usually somebody else's that they've heard on a pod or something else that they've read. And then they just kind of regurgitate it, right? And that's how these things happen, where somebody's take gets turned into the standard, and ADP flies up the draft board and everything else. And then when they don't work out, it's kind of like, ha. So just have your own take, have your own opinion. Don't be afraid to go against the grain. That's all I'm trying to say.
I think what happens is, one, I think, like you said, people are afraid to put the takes out there, and then like Evan Silva comes around and he says like, hey, like I think Calvin Ridley, top 10 wide receiver with Julio. And then you see Calvin Ridley top 5, and then you have the people that go like above what it's like, oh, Calvin Ridley is receiver 8. Well, that's not hot enough. Wide receiver 3. What do you think about that? I'm going to get even hotter. And like that just starts that whole thing of, like you said, the upper echelon of analysts starting it, and then people coming in, flooding the market with the same takes. And you have the people that just go overboard with that because like, well, that wasn't hot enough. Let me put something else out there.
I agree. So don't be that guy. Don't be that person. So I say all that to say this: hit that fucking subscribe button and listen to the show. Go over to the website and check that, or join the Slack channel. And I guarantee you'll win a fucking championship. That's how much I believe in it. At the very least, let me put it this way: I will guarantee you this, that you will make the fucking playoffs. If you listen to this show and you jump into the Slack chat, you talk to us, believe me, I have no problem with helping. But I've drafted for people before. I have helped people draft. We don't ask for money, none of that stuff. All I ask for is hit that subscribe button, and that's it. Whether it's through YouTube, whether it's through your podcast, I really appreciate it. Leave a rating and review, and jump into our Slack channel. Let's just start having some conversation. Let's have some fun. And yeah, so we're probably going to give some stuff out to give back. So anyways, I really appreciate everybody checking out the show, and we will talk to everybody next week. Peace.